We are losing objective truth, and it's getting worse because of AI and media being dubbed fake news, but it's been happening for longer than we'd like to admit due to echo chambers. You're listening to Fed Up Figuring It Out, unpacking politics, culture, and global power. Each week we'll dive into a new topic, from capitalism and fascism to gender roles and red pill culture and everything in between. This isn't an experts podcast, but a university student with a passion for research and ranting and pushing through indifference. If you ever thought, why does this all feel like bullshit? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Priya Mignot. As always, everything cited throughout this episode will be included in this episode's description. When Charlie Kirk died, I had no idea who he was. And I'm a communications major who loves to keep a tab on politics. That should have been weird, that I'd never heard of him. But the truth is, we don't live in a shared reality anymore. We live in carefully designed and personalized echo chambers. And very clearly, Charlie was not a part of mine. We exist in cozy little internet bubbles that tell us we're always right, and that's a problem. Before we dive into why exactly echo chambers are a problem and getting worse in our modern age, first we need to define a couple definitions, just so we're all on the same page going forward. An echo chamber is an environment where people are only exposed to information and opinions that reflect and reinforce their own. This often can create misinformation and distort a person's perception by thinking they are always correct. And they can exist both online and offline. They have existed for centuries. It's not just a new phenomenon, echo chambers, but it is getting worse because of media. And they've been going on forever because, for example, whenever humans started, we've been forming groups that share opinions and share beliefs and believe in the same kind of stories and things like this. And this is very normal. You can think of political parties that's sort of, regardless of what side you're on, that's an echo chamber of sorts. Affiliating yourself with people of the same belief to have it echoed back at you is an echo chamber. And this is a very normal psychological and human phenomenon. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is a challenge in our current day. Our thoughts and opinions are literally echoed back at us in these chambers. Organized religion would be a great example of this. It doesn't really matter what religion you're a part of, but you're in these bubbles that your opinions are echoed back to you. The stories you believe in are echoed back to you. And that is, I think, one of the clear examples of an echo chamber in real life. And it also happens within the friend groups. You hang out with people who have the same values, share the same beliefs as you, and that is also an echo chamber. A quote from Levy and Razin, who are both scholars in this field, say, quote, "Chambers arise when individuals segregate with the like-minded. Echoes happen when these individuals fail to process the information that is being correlated and repeated within the chambers." End quote. So the idea is that you're not thinking about what is being told back to you in these chambers necessarily because it just feels right. And again, it happens to everyone. Everyone does it. I'm not going to penalize people on this. It's just important to have critical skills to think about what's outside your chamber. Anyhow, the second term we're going to talk about today is a filter bubble, which is a term popularized by scholar Eli Prazer, where algorithms filter content based on user behavior, limiting exposure to differing viewpoints. So this filter bubble is the new phenomenon that is attaching itself to echo chambers. It's very specific to the internet because it's a filter, and it's playing on this idea that the chamber is just getting tighter and tighter around people, and there's less difference in the echoes coming back at people due to algorithmic bias, and we'll get more into that. And so there is some pros to it, it's comfortable and enjoyable, and we like to see things that we agree with. The cons is you actually don't know what the majority of people are thinking, and you have a skewed perspective of reality, and everyone does. I don't need us to go yelling at each other. It's everyone has a skewed perspective of reality at this point. But you kind of live in this bubble with no one else's opinions. You kind of live in this bubble where other people's opinions don't exist. The third thing I want to talk about today is epistemic closure. And it's a theory in communication studies when a system or community becomes closed off to outside information that might challenge its beliefs. And again, this has happened throughout the centuries, regardless of the echo chamber you're in. And this epistemic closure creates a confirmation bias, which is a tendency to favor info that reinforces our existing beliefs. And we kind of even talked about that in our last episode with fascism, about how with conspiracy theories, people will cling to the beliefs even though they're not true because it validates some feeling they've already had in them. And this is kind of the same idea of like rejecting other ideas that don't align with your thoughts and opinions and feelings. The major danger behind epistemic closure, as the scholars Levy and Razin put it, is that echo chambers create this epistemic closure and are repeatedly blamed as a result for increased polarization and political fragmentation. And so, although echo chambers have been happening since the dawn of humanity, it's now an increasing issue because of how closed off we are getting from each other due to the internet. And so all these three terms, they overlap in a shared danger in intellectual isolation and increased polarization. It's a big mixing pot it's not a good recipe, guys. So the internet promised us more access to information, and it delivered that, but only the kind we agree with. And that just can't work. Like, that just doesn't work. In a world where anyone can say anything, it's important to know that anyone can fall for anything too, including me and you. And I already talked about this a little bit. We are all in echo chambers. We're all in filter bubbles. We all have epistemic closure in us. It's not like one person doesn't and the other does. Everyone does. And it's just important to acknowledge that in ourselves and acknowledge that in the media we're viewing. You have to be critical about what you're seeing. And let's be honest, most of us aren't. How does epistemic closure and filter bubbles happen to increase the dangers around echo chambers? And I already kind of touched on this, but a large part of it is it's a mix of algorithmic programming and psychological and social behavior. We naturally gravitate towards people who think the same things we do. But algorithmic confirmation bias is that social media algorithms learn what we like and double down on it. If you engage with feminism, you'll see more feminism. If you engage with red pill content, you'll see more red pill content. Similarly, like if you like The Weeknd, you'll see more Weeknd content. It doesn't have to just be like specifically political things. It's everything, right? Like if you like NASCAR, you're going to see NASCAR. It's just how it works with social media. Chambers occur online and offline very naturally to foster better discussion. But social media companies are built to create confirmation bias. They are built to create epistemic closure. Another major part of like how this happens is tribalism and identity. Political or cultural beliefs become identity-based. And so when you disagree with someone, it becomes a threat to yourself and a threat to your group. We all tend to like being around people who think the same things we do. But if you're not willing to criticize the group you're in, like the in-group you're in, whether that's a political party or a religion or your friend group, and like call out things you don't agree with, that kind of ties into this like it's a threat, and it's a psychological phenomenon, but it's a threat to yourself to out yourself from the group. But this is also a huge danger in our modern day, especially with more extremist views getting more social media attention. And if you don't disagree with them, you're gonna fall for them and just keep going with it. As a BBC article puts it, quote, "When you're together with friends, you might have the odd disagreement here and there, but you'll probably all share similar opinions deep down and might forget that there are other people who think differently," end quote. And I've noticed this in my friends too. I talk with my friends and we all have, I guess, like, we don't have similar life experiences, but we're all university students. And so we talk and we're like, oh yeah, this is what I thoughts on this, and this is my thoughts on this. And then we like go and talk to other people and we're like, oh, that is not a shared opinion. That is not a widely shared opinion or view on the world. And so I think everyone has that happen at least, well, multiple times throughout their lives. It's a bit of a thing. But that also is a good indication that maybe you're too closed into your echo chambers and you need to branch out. And that's what you're doing when you realize your opinions might not be shared by everyone. Both algorithmic bias and tribalism and identity are partially fueled by a few things. Well, and like the whole echo chambers thing is fueled by a few things as well. Part of it's groupthink. People are fearful of social rejection. And we just talked about this. So they mirror the beliefs around them, and those beliefs become normalized even if they're extreme. And I even had this experience when I was working back in my high school days. I was a part of the Friday for Futures movement in Calgary, and that is the climate protesting movement that Greta Thunberg started. And so every Friday we'd go out and protest, basically, for the environment. And you can have whatever opinion you want on that, but what I noticed when I was in that group specifically is that people they demonize the oil and gas industry to such a degree, and they were like, people who work in oil and gas are bad people. And it's like, I didn't believe that. I ended up working in oil and gas too, ironically, but it was just the things they were saying I didn't agree with. I agreed with protecting the environment. I fully agreed that we needed to move partially to renewable sources of energy, but I didn't think you should shut off every oil and gas plant in the province to do it. Like, I was like, there's a different way to do it. And I'm also like, these people who are running these companies aren't idiots. Like, they're not. And that was the weird thing, was they kind of treated like everyone who worked in oil and gas was dumb, which I didn't like. And so we would have meetings every Friday, and like we would talk about different things and how we wanted to move forward. And a lot of these opinions were shared that were very demeaning of oil and gas. And I wanted to say something, but I wouldn't, because I didn't want to be like socially rejected from the group or ostracized. And I had seen it happen before, so I was like, I don't want to do that. But I did end up just leaving the group because I just couldn't handle it anymore. I just thought their views were a bit extreme, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there to say you disagree with something in a group. And we've all had to do it at some point. That group I did not want to do it with, and so I just left, which is also a good way to handle that in some cases. If you're like, this is getting too extreme for me, you're allowed to back out. You're allowed to walk away. Online it's a bit harder because it's not like a physical, like you can't detach physically. But we'll get into more how you can do that in a bit. Echo chambers are also fueled by dopamine and the outrage economy, which, for example, like platforms like Instagram and Pinterest and TikTok and all these other ones they reward engagement, basically. That's how they make their money. That's how they keep you interested. And the engagement thrives on emotional content. And the news has also done this historically forever. And we studied this as a comms major, but like clickbait. It's like, they'll give you like the most nasty headline and you're like, oh my God, I'm so mad. And then people won't even read the article sometimes, which is annoying. But then you hit the article and you're like, oh, it's like, it's still annoying, but like, I kind of get it now. So no matter what you're in, whether it's the news or whether it's social media, anything that's media based does thrive on emotional content. And so it'll show you things you disagree with and then stitch it with something you agree with, or it'll like paint the most nasty headlines about someone of a different opinion than you. And we also have to be very aware of that it thrives on us being emotionally drawn into it. The other part of that is the dopamine aspect. And so social media is effectively a drug for the brain in some capacity. According to the social practitioner McCann, quote, when the brain is engaged in activity that is positively stimulating, dopamine is released into the prefrontal cortex, generating a number of reactions that basically makes us feel great. Woo! This built-in reward system also is a drug delivery system, sending signals to the brain that not only make us feel great, but they make us want to have that feeling again and feel it more intensely, end quote. And this is like why we keep scrolling. I would argue it's also partially why our generation, especially Gen Z, has such a low attention span. Like I think it's like 30 seconds or something like that. And then we swipe. And we're like addicted to swiping. It's not even that we'll finish a video. We'll just keep swiping. And that is because when you watch a video, you get a dopamine hit. And then you swipe and you get another dopamine hit. And you just keep swiping to get those dopamine hits. It is interesting because like you won't even finish the video necessarily, because you just want the next hit. And if a video is a minute long, well, you don't want to wait a minute for your next hit. You're just going to wait 5 seconds. So that is also the problem with social media, is it is a drug of sorts. And it's also why we like echo chambers and don't like things that fall outside of that. And that is because as you're swiping, you don't really want to think while you're swiping. You just want the dopamine hit after dopamine hit. But when you see something you don't agree with and that's scrolling, you're like, wait, I don't agree with that. Why don't I agree with that? why am I angry about this? Like, there's a couple things that go on in your head that make you start to think and not just mindlessly doom scroll. And that isn't beneficial to the dopamine hitting cycle either. And the social media companies know this. They know this because their algorithms are designed to keep you in your bubble for a reason, so that you keep seeing the same things over and over and over again, and you keep swiping. It's kind of like our social media is a house of mirrors, except all the mirrors just show you nodding in agreement. And so another part of this is that we're all chronically online right now. And as I said, echo chambers have always existed. They're getting worse because of the internet, and we're all chronically online. It doesn't matter how old you are at this point, honestly. Like, my grandparents are on a phone, my cousins who are in Gen Alpha are on a phone. It doesn't really matter what generation you're in at this point. You're on your phone. So it's not just like younger generations that are on their phone, it's everyone. And these echo chambers are becoming more cemented due to the internet. And whereas back in the day, we used to have conversations with other people and it was okay to have minor differences with one another, or just like talk to people of different beliefs, that doesn't happen as much anymore because social interaction is becoming more and more limited. Author Bill Bishop points out that this isolation plus the echo chambers are tearing apart our social fabric and shared values. And I think we can see that across every country at this point. This is the part where it's leading to more polarization too, is because we're not talking to actual people. We're not sharing our opinions with physical people. We're sharing our opinions online, and the chamber is designed to keep the people who will agree with you in your circle. And then you come into the real world and you're like, why do these idiots believe something different than me? And it's like, because you live in a bubble. We all live in bubbles, and maybe we should get offline every once in a while. But we used to have these shared values that existed offline, and I think we're all noticing that those are becoming more and more ruptured. But like, oh, people don't share the same values as me, and that's a big problem. And it is arguably more dangerous to be segregated in real life than it is to be online, because online relationships give us a different relationality to other people and a greater way of sharing our opinions, and also having our opinions challenged. That's so important, to have your opinions challenged every once in a while. And I'm not saying like swing all the other way and go talk to someone who will never agree with you, because that's not helpful. But I am saying like it's good to have your opinions challenged every once in a while. In real life, this happens when you talk to people of different anything. Like, do you interact with people of the opposite gender in real life? Sexuality, religion, race, nationality. And if not, you might want to push yourself to start, because even when you start to push those boundaries, you start to realize you live in a bubble online. Echo chambers aren't the sole thing to blame for what we're seeing happening in our world, but they are making it worse. And a few like examples in action of echo chambers and epistemic closure in practice is, again, like, I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was until he died. And my friend texted me, she's like, he died. I'm like, I don't even know who that is. Couldn't even tell you. And even after I saw his videos, I'm like, I've never seen this man in my life. So, and yet people were talking about it like they knew him or had seen his videos. And I was like, what different reality of the internet are we on? And don't get me wrong, I didn't agree after watching his videos that I didn't agree with anything he said. So it makes sense that he was not in my filter bubble. But at the same time, it is weird that I didn't know who he was when he was clearly something very popular to one side of the internet or one particular echo chamber. I just had no idea. Another example of this is like January 6th insurrection in the States. And those people who thought the election was stolen genuinely believe the election was stolen. They're not completely delusional, which is weird, but they like live in this filter bubble and this chamber that made them feel like the election was stolen and like that reality was what was happening. And so like basic truth was taken away from them due to their bubbles. And that's also a huge problem. Those are just two examples of echo chambers in action, but there are plenty more. And you could probably think of one from this week alone in your own personal life. There's a bunch of things where you realize that you live in a bubble and you just have to take notice of them. The consequences of echo chambers, though, is that online radicalization is more present. The pipeline from YouTube to incel forums to extremist views is real and proven by research, for example. And it's attributed to a rise in violence, extremism, populism, and polarization. It's easier to get into more extremist niches now because of online filter bubbles, because you start liking something and it just keeps ping-ponging you deeper and deeper into that extreme view. But another part of online radicalization that I'll touch on right now is that it feeds into groupthink. So you don't want to disagree to oust yourself from the group, so you're just going to keep going further down, right? It's interesting too, because filter bubbles are also very curated to not just who you are online, but who you are offline. For example, women and men have significantly different social media feeds. Why, right? And yeah, we do. So if we both have different feeds, men and women, and then that also like goes for all of their genders as well. We all have different feeds because of that. And I'm assuming it would also go for race and religion. We all have different feeds on what is happening online. It's not just that, like, for example, people are arguing that politics and the ideological gap between men and women is increasing. And I would say it is. For sure, I would say it is. But it's not just politics that's doing that. It is social media and echo chambers. Because once you're in them, you're like, oh, everyone shares my opinions. Why would I want to go outside this bubble? And like dating someone across that gap is going outside that bubble pretty extremely in some cases. So although women and men are both falling into echo chambers that are different and curated towards their gender, it is important to note that women's tend to be less extremist in some capacity, and men's sometimes, and we will talk more about this in episode 11 of this season in the Red Pill Pipeline, they fall further into extremist views. And that's not meant to diss one gender or the other. It's just a note that is important to acknowledge, is that while women's echo chambers exist, men's echo chambers also exist, and they can both get extreme, yet minorities are typically scapegoated and attacked more in men's echo chambers than they are in women's. And so that's not meant to be a diss against either, again, but it is just something to note about the dangers of echo chambers and the rise in violence that can come off screen as a result, or offline as a result of these gendered echo chambers. This just further illustrates the point on why we need to talk to people in real life and connect with people who are different from us. Because you don't want to live in bubbles online and think that's real, and then not talk to, like, for example, not talking to people of the opposite gender. That's not helpful. It's bad to fall into either. It's bad to fall into either extreme, or it's bad to be in a filter bubble at all, but we're going to be no matter what. And I think that doesn't change. Like, we're always going to be in these kind of like gendered filter bubbles, but it is our job as media consumers and as media users to work to pop those bubbles in real life and kind of branch out. The problem isn't that we disagree, it's that we don't even know what the other side is seeing anymore. Like, I don't have a brother. I have no idea what men are seeing online. But I know what girls are seeing online, and I have occasionally seen my cousin's phones, and I'm like, we are not on the same side of the internet at all. Or like, I'll go to my cousin's house and they'll be watching the same TikTok I watched last week. And it's like, why are you seeing the same thing I'm seeing, right? Things you gotta question. The challenge with echo chambers and the algorithmic bias is that it is lovely and comforting and yet still dangerous to our social fabric and our shared beliefs. But that's also why they're so hard to escape. For example, my Pinterest feed. It's basically like Taylor Swift and poetry and ranch-style cottagecore living and pink hair and warm drinks and all these things I really like to see. I don't want my Pinterest to be any other way. I don't. I like it how it is. I like going on it to see the things I want to see. And that's extremely normal. Because echo chambers often offer a sense of belonging, clarity, and certainty in a weird, uncertain world. Because there is a safety in thinking you're on the right side of history, or that you're always right about a topic, and having that opinion echoed back to you. There's a comfort in that. But Unchecked, it can become smugness, dismissal, or radicalism. And those are things we need to be really careful and cautious of. It's dangerous for both the left and the right. The consequences often weigh more heavily on marginalized groups, depending on which side you're on. But you can go too far either way in this department. The internet and social media, though, aren't the enemies. In fact, the internet itself is kind of a neutral tool depending on how you use it. And more diverse opinions can be shared and accessed via the internet than ever before. I can know what is happening on the other side of the world versus like my ancestors couldn't. And so we can kind of see like different realities better through the internet. But you need to have like media literacy and critical skills to decipher what's real. And on top of that, push yourself to see what your chambers aren't showing you. So you can live in this bubble, but you have to know that there's a whole other world out there. So what can we do about that? We can't completely opt out because echo chambers are embedded into tech design, embedded into our psychological and behavioral phenomena as humans. But we can engage with people with outside opinions. And as I said, like you don't want to go to the complete opposite side like a Newton's cradle because you're just going to swing right back. As the BBC article we were already talking about highlights, quote, you don't necessarily have to get the exact opposite opinion of your own. Sometimes this can be counterproductive and lead you back into the echo chamber where your point of view feels safe and shared. End quote. And so this is just important to keep in mind, like you don't want to go all the other way, but you do want to talk to people who have niche or nuanced opinions on subjects that are different from your own, because you're never going to grow as a human being or intellectually if you don't. It's also important to question the origin of your beliefs. Do they come from your schooling? Do they come from your community, your religion, your friends, your family? Like, for example, if you're raised by liberal parents, you're probably going to be liberal. If you're raised by conservative parents, you'll probably be conservative. And so it's important for all of us as we become adults at any point in our growth as human beings to be like, hey, do I actually believe what I've been taught by these different people? It's my turn to now make my own opinion. And that can be really scary, but it's also really important. Another key part is teaching media literacy. And this is not just for young people, it's for everyone involved. Older people need it too. For example, the last Canadian election, I was talking to my grandfather, and he was convinced because of something he saw on Facebook that Carney and Trudeau were cousins. And he's like, I can't vote for Carney because he's Trudeau's cousin. And I was like, where are you getting this opinion? Like, this is not even true. And again, that ties into conspiracy theories from the last episode, but it's not even close to true. I told him, I'm like, that's not true. And he's like, well, I saw it online. I'm like, okay. And so it's not just young people need it, but older people need it too. It's every generation, every person needs media literacy. One aspect of this though is that AI is going to make it harder and has already made it harder to tell what is real and will continue to do so. And that is why this skill is so vital for pretty much every person. It's important to check a variety of sources as well before sharing info. For example, my grandfather probably would have never seen that had someone not shared it and shared it again and reposted it. And it's like, why don't you just look up a Trudeau ancestry tree? You're gonna find that Carney's not his cousin. But no one wanted to check. And that's the thing too. No one wants to check if the information in their chamber is correct because they just want to believe it is, which is a challenge. Like for me, for the last couple of years, anytime I see something posted online, I know I live in a bubble and I will check on actual media news sources online if that information is correct before I repost something. Because we don't need people to keep reposting false information or things that make them feel good but aren't actually true. That's not helpful at all. The other part of this is with the outrage economy, it's important to unplug and touch some grass. When rage is getting to you and when the world feels too much, it's important to go outside, unplug from your phone, take a trip to the rec center or the library. Just do anything and be on your phone, honestly. Because that outrage cycle and the dopamine hits are just gonna keep feeding that emotion in you, and you don't need that. And that honestly can take you to both. That feeling, that emotional connection is what drives you into extremist views. The important part of unplugging from your phone is that filter bubbles don't exist offline. They are an online phenomenon, as we talked about. And so it is easier to connect in reality to what is happening. Echo chambers still exist, but it is more grounded in like a shared reality when you're offline. And so just unplugging really can do wonders for mental health and for making sure you have a well-rounded structural opinion. Another key part is it's important to stay curious. So talk to people about different perspectives. Ask yourself if something is true or why someone thinks the way they do. Like, why does this person have this opinion? Well, for XYZ. It's just important to ask those questions and think a little bit more critically about what you're consuming and what other people are consuming and telling you they're consuming. You also have to question whether you're getting dragged into too much of one specific type of content, and not letting like confirmation and epistemic closure get to you. One example in my life is that I was following a lot of women who were talking about dating, and a lot of the reels were like funny and humorous, and it was like talking about like Hinge dates, and how they like holding their fish. And there was like or their trucks, and it was kind of like a humorous thing to like laugh at, or like the one where it's like my secret skill, getting my hoodie back after you've stolen it, and it's like we all know that's terrible. Like all those things are they're funny in some capacity, but at the same time I was also getting TikToks and reels that were more serious, and it's like guys don't know how to ask questions on dates. Like there's this ideological gap. What is happening with dating? And it's like those things, the funny ones were funny until they were coupled with the serious ones. And then it kind of got like this weird view and cynical view on dating and men. And I was like, well, it's not worth it, right? Like and mind you, I'm not on the apps anymore. But I was kind of getting more and more cynical about relationships like that. And so it just took me to unplug and talk to people in real life to be like, okay, maybe that's not true. And maybe it is true, but maybe I need to like back out of this a little bit because it's getting too much for me. And that's an important thing to note in yourself when you're looking at content. So honestly, I'm still online, and while I scroll, I like purposely don't like that kind of content anymore, or as much as I used to, because once you start liking it, that's when the algorithm will start clicking and put more in. And I don't want that. What can we do is that I actually don't know the answer, but I also know that being ignorant isn't harmless anymore, and it's important to make sure that we're all practicing good media literacy skills going forward. Some final thoughts. It's okay to have your own opinion, your own beliefs, your own values. There are basic truths that we each hold in ourselves, and you don't need to disregard them. But every once in a while, engage with a person or content that counters them. And this kind of helps you to stay curious and explore your own beliefs. Echo chambers are comforting, they're validating, and they're quietly isolating us from one another. We're not just on different sides anymore, we are in different realities. And if we want a better future, we have to break the algorithm, burst the bubble, and actually listen to each other again. Just ensure you are staying curious about what you're consuming and trying to diversify it as much as possible. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you had an aha moment or just enjoyed hanging out with me, please pass this episode along to a friend, drop a quick review, and let's keep chatting over on Instagram. Sharing is caring, and it helps this podcast grow. I'll see you in the next episode.